Most people are not bad at reading the room. They're just not looking at the right things. They're watching mouths, listening to words, waiting for obvious signals like a crossed arm or a furrowed brow, or that familiar flat voice that says, "I'm fine," when nothing is fine. And they miss everything. The actual conversation, the one happening underneath in posture and breath and the millisecond shift in someone's eyes. That one keeps going completely unread. Here's what's almost never talked about. Every human body is transmitting a continuous, real-time emotional broadcast. Right now, always, and most of us were never taught how to receive it. So today, I want to show you the specific signals most people overlook, the internal shift you need to make before you can read them accurately, and the one mistake that turns even perfect timing into a misconnection. Because here's the part that matters most. Timing isn't about finding the right moment. It's about recognizing the one that's already there. Think about the last time you tried to have an important conversation with someone, and it went sideways before it even really began. Maybe you've been holding something for days, waiting for the right opening, and then finally, the evening felt quiet enough, the mood felt okayish, and you started talking, and within 60 seconds, something hardened in their face. And you couldn't name what it was, but you felt it. Like the temperature in a room dropped by 5 degrees without a window opening. That moment, that specific, disorienting moment, is what this whole conversation is about. Because on the outside, everything looked ready. No obvious tension. No competing distraction. And yet something in the air was wrong. And you couldn't put your finger on why. And afterwards, you probably replayed it a dozen times wondering what you missed. And here's what scares most people about that feeling. Not just that they got the timing wrong, but that maybe they can't trust themselves to get it right. That maybe reading people is some innate skill they were simply not given. That maybe they'll always be slightly out of step with the people they love most. Stay with me, because that belief, specifically that one, is exactly what I want to dismantle today. The first thing we need to understand is why the signals most of us learn to watch for are the wrong signals entirely. We were all, in various ways, taught to monitor what people say and what their most obvious expressions communicate. That's where most social coaching points us. Maintain eye contact. Notice if they look away. Watch for smiling. These are, in a word, surface. They are the final output of an emotional process that was already completed 3 to 5 seconds earlier, deeper in the body, before it ever reached the face. By the time an emotion becomes a visible expression, the body has already been living in it for a moment. The jaw tightened, then softened into a smile or hardened into a press. The shoulders lifted on an inhale and then either released or stayed up. The hands, quiet against a knee, suddenly found something to hold. These micro transitions, the shift between states rather than the states themselves, are the actual signal. And almost no one is watching for the shift. They're watching for the end result. This is a documented phenomenon in nonverbal research. The body changes state before the conscious mind decides what to do with the emotion, which means that if you want to know where someone really is, you need to watch the moment of transition, the breath that changes, the weight that redistributes, the eyes that go from soft to slightly unfocused without the person realizing it themselves. That's the language most people don't know they're speaking, and it's the most honest thing about us. Now, here's the part one want you to really absorb, because this is where most people unknowingly create disconnection, even when they're trying so hard to do the opposite. Choosing the right moment is not a skill of observation alone. It's a skill of internal state first, and observation second. What that means is this: if you're walking toward a conversation already dysregulated, already anxious, already rehearsing what you're going to say, or bracing for how they might respond, you are not actually reading the other person at all. You are projecting. Your nervous system is so busy managing its own noise that the incoming signal from theirs gets distorted. You see what you fear, or you see what you hope, but you don't see what's actually there. This is not a character flaw. This is biology. An activated nervous system narrows its perceptual field. It's a survival mechanism that was never designed for intimate conversation, but activates there just as readily as anywhere else. And here's the uncomfortable truth that I think most of us need to hear directly. You have probably misread someone you love. Not because you don't care enough, but because you were too activated to see clearly. And I mean, that's just it, isn't it? That's the whole thing. You were trying so hard, and the try itself was the obstacle. Take a breath. That lands heavy, and it's supposed to. So before we talk about what to look for in the other person's body, we have to talk about yours. Because the capacity to read another human being accurately, to catch the real-time signals of their readiness, their tension, their openness, is a regulated nervous system skill. Full stop. Which brings us to the first real practice. I call it the still point. Before you initiate anything, before you speak the first word of something that matters, you pause. Not visibly, not dramatically, just internally. You feel the soles of your feet, the weight of your own hands, the slow, cool pull of one easy breath. You are not calming down for their sake. You are tuning in for your own, because a tuned-in nervous system receives information. An activated one broadcasts noise. This sounds small. It isn't. It is the difference between walking into a room and actually being in the room. And once you're genuinely present in your own body, something subtle but extraordinary happens. You start noticing things you weren't catching before. You notice that your partner's shoulders didn't fully drop when they sat down. You notice the quality of their silence, whether it's resting or held. You notice that their breath is coming from their chest and not their belly, which means something is still being processed, still being carried. None of these things are dire. None of them mean the conversation cannot happen. They are simply data. Real, honest data about where someone is in this exact moment, in this exact evening, after this exact day. And here's the second thing that matters, which I call the threshold test. It's a single question, and you ask it before you begin, not out loud, but to yourself. It is, does their body look like it's arriving or like it's still somewhere else? Because there are two kinds of physical presence. There's the presence where someone is in a room with you fully, where their gaze is soft and their posture is settled, and there's a quality of availability in how they're holding themselves. And then there's a presence where someone is physically there, sitting across from you, and yet the body tells you they're still replaying the traffic or the meeting or the argument they had silently in their own head on the way home. Arriving looks like warmth in the face. Weight in the seat, hands are still. Still somewhere else looks like a jaw that keeps working even in silence. A gaze that slightly schemes the surface of things. A restlessness in the feet or the fingers that has no particular purpose. Neither state is a rejection. Neither state is about you. But one state is ready to receive you, and the other needs a few more minutes to land. If you sense the latter, the single most powerful thing you can do is offer presence without pressure. Sit near them. Let the quiet exist. Say something genuinely low stakes, the kind of thing that invites a response but doesn't demand one. Because the body comes back on its own timeline, and the worst thing you can do to that process is interrupt it with urgency. And if you're honest with yourself, you felt this from the other side. The moment someone needed something from you, before you were back inside your own skin. The way that felt like being reached for while you were still underwater. The way you wanted to respond, and simply couldn't quite get there yet. That empathy, that body memory of not being ready, is the most useful navigation tool you have. Now, once you sense that arrival, once the breath changes and the posture settles and the gaze comes back into focus, that is when the third thing becomes possible. I call it the open door. Not a demand, not an announcement, just a small, warm, low-threat entry point. Something that says, I'm here, and there's no emergency and we have time. A touch on the arm, a soft version of their name, a question about their experience of the day that is genuinely curious, not instrumental, not a setup for what you actually want to discuss. The open door is not manipulation. It is respect. It is saying, I see that you just got here. I'm going to let you arrive before I ask you for anything. And what that does to the quality of the conversation that follows, it's the difference between a door opening and a door being pushed open. One allows, the other startles. And startled people do not connect, they defend. If you've tried this and the door still didn't open, that is not a failure of timing. That's information. It means the threshold moment hasn't arrived yet. And the wisest thing you can do is release the timeline entirely. Not forever, just for now. Because a conversation held in a body that finally feels safe will always go further than one extracted from a body that was still guarded. There's a version of you on the other side of these three practices who moves through relationships differently, who doesn't brace for conversations anymore because you've gotten quiet enough to feel the room before you enter it, who doesn't wonder why things keep going sideways because you've learned to read the signal underneath the signal, who knows in your body when to step forward and when to simply wait. That version of you doesn't just have better conversations. They build a different kind of trust, the slow, deep cellular kind, the kind that other people can feel without being able to explain why they feel so safe around you. You're not trying to become a different person. You're learning to slow down enough to see what's already there. And that changes everything.